those tickets are like $16 a piece, I think, for that theater.
Man, what's the last movie I saw in theater? The last movie I saw in theaters was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Beyond the Spider-Verse, wherever the new one's called. That's the last movie I saw in theaters. Yeah. I hadn't seen anything since then. I'm like 100% sure.
I can't think of
what's the that's a topic for this podcast, is like, what's going on with movies? Like, people after COVID, people just decided we were all right not going to movies. We're just not going to go back. It seems like there's no recovery there. And I don't know what is going to be the thing that brings people back.
Nothing.
Do you think movie theaters are just like dead?
I mean, they're on the way. For say, like that theater, with a movie like Dune, I will go see that at the movie theater.
Yeah.
But if I wanted to go see like a regular, like, I don't know, like an indie film or like something that's like a rom-com that Julie would want to watch, I'm going to wait until that comes out on a streaming service.
Yeah.
Because if there's no point in seeing it on a big screen, I'm not going to pay all that money to go see it on a big screen.
Do you think that streaming services and like people's just home, like the average person's home theater setup now is just so nice that it doesn't really compete with the movie theater? Because I've seen things in movie theaters that unless it was IMAX, I feel like I have a better view at home on my television.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I've seen movies where like, oh, there's this one little notch in the theater screen, and the whole movie my eyes just focused on that little notch, and like I'm not paying attention to the movie, and I would never have that problem at home. Whereas in the time period where everybody had these big square blocky televisions in their house, maybe you had somebody with a big screen CRT, in the 90s or something. Yeah, right. Movie theaters were amazing, but I just don't think they compete with like the average person has a 4K OLED on their wall. It just
right. Yeah. Oh no, definitely.
That's an interesting. I never really thought about it. Maybe before COVID, I think that there was already little clips before movies and stuff that would say like, "Thank you for watching the movie in theater," or "Thank you for coming out and keeping the theater experience alive" and stuff.
Right.
That existed before COVID. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so, COVID may have been the final straw, but I think it was already on its way out before 2020, and it's just never going to recover.
And the other thing too is like a lot of these movies are released at the same time on a streaming service and in the theater. Mm-hmm. Why would if I'm already paying for a streaming service?
Yeah, true. Get your money's worth out.
Why in the world would I ever pay extra to go see it?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, for 90% of movies,
nobody cares.
Like,
yeah.
Even now Marvel, like, they're kind of like wait and see too.
The Marvel thing is, I think they just
oversaturated.
Yeah, they just milk that cow way too much. There's no more. Those udders are dry, baby. Like there's no more.
Right.
They milked all the cash out of the Marvel movie universe that they could, and people are just tired of it at this point. All right, but this episode we're going to talk about Hex by Thomas Olde Heuvelt.
Whatever. I heard I listened to a girl doing a review, and she said his name, and I was like, okay, that's kind of how I was saying it. And then I thought, well, who's saying that she was saying it right? So who knows?
Right, exactly. I need to hear him say it to really know. So you recommended this book. Why did you recommend it?
A couple reasons. One, like, it's such an interesting concept.
Yeah.
It definitely is like the people I've told about the book is not horror, but it's horrific. And like the ending to me is just wild and fantastic, and like pulls no punches, and like
yeah,
it pays off in the end quite well.
Yeah, I liked the concept of the book a lot with the witch. So if you haven't read Hex, we're going to talk spoilers. Give our review of the book, but there will be spoilers for sure. We're going to talk about the whole book, beginning to end. So I mean,
definitely. And some of the reviews I've read go kind of either way with this book.
Yeah.
And when I read some of the reviews that were not as flattering to it, like I could understand where they were coming from too.
Yeah.
But I think overall, like, I highly recommend it.
I didn't watch any reviews. So normally I watch a bunch of reviews getting ready for the episode, but it's because I've already made up my mind. I haven't made up my mind yet on this book. And I don't really want to be like influenced by listening to too many reviews. I tried to listen to a few, but most of the ones I listened to were like spoiler free, and it was people kind of describing the book, encouraging you to read it, but it wasn't like real detailed, like review kind of thing. I really enjoyed the concept of the witch, and I liked how she was like, it was like this non-threatening yet menacing presence of the town.
Right.
Like at the beginning of the book, before things go awry, essentially the witch just kind of hangs out where she wants to, and you just have to let her be. It's like if a poisonous snake's in your yard, but you know where it is and you know it's there. And so it's like, it still is like creepy, and like, I don't want to go near it. I'm just, but at the same time, it's like, it's over there. And I know that if I don't mess with it, like, it's not going to just chase after me for no reason. You know what I mean? Like there is like a rules to it in a way.
I love how people like take a bed sheet and like
just cover her up,
toss it, cover up, or whatever. That's really good.
And the premise of the witch, she's chained up, so she can't move.
She's chained. Well, her hands are chained.
Her hands are chained, and
then her eyes and mouth are sewn shut.
But there's like
except for the little corner of her mouth.
Right, and there's like a little bit of history that they give about how they wanted to see what would happen if they cut the stitches loose, and that's when they learned about how she whispers, and if you listen to her whispers, which plays a big part in the story, so you listen to her whispers, then it'll make you like uncontrollably want to commit suicide.
Right.
And just in like violent ways, like really violent. And if you leave the town, the people that are living in the town are stuck in the town. So if you leave the town, you're cursed. If you're gone for too long, you will want to go back or commit suicide wherever you are. Like you can't just say, well, I'll never
escape the curse.
Yeah, I won't tell anyone about the witch, but at the same time, I'm going to move away and just never talk. You can't do that. You basically, when you move to the town, you're cursed, and you're part of the town forever, like it or not.
Right.
I love the concept. I love the concept there, and the way the story is told.
Her story is that, she was deemed a witch by the early settlers back in the late 1600s. And you find out more obviously along the way that like they suspected she was a witch because her son had allegedly been sick and died. And then they saw her son walking around later, and so they figured she must have brought him back from the dead. And so they accuse her of witchcraft. So what they do is not only do they accuse her of witchcraft, but then they make her choose between her children, killing the son or her daughter. And then inevitably they wind up she kills one, and then the townspeople kill the other one anyway. And then they put her to death, and then she like rises from the dead or however it happens. And from then on, that area is cursed. So like, they say like that original group of people completely disappeared, a la like Roanoke Island,
Roanoke, yeah.
Like everyone just disappeared, and then later on more people came in, and then they just assumed the witch essentially. Now, one of the questions that was brought up in the book, and one of the questions I always had was she really a witch originally, or did what happened, was it caused by what the townspeople did to her, and then they brought essentially the curse on themselves?
Yeah.
Or the atrocities that they give on her, because he makes it very vague whether or not the son actually died.
Oh yeah, the townspeople
just didn't see him, and they just assumed he was dead.
Yeah, but I mean, either way, she has to be a witch, right? I mean, there's been what happened to her is terrible, but there's been worse things that have happened to other people in history, and they didn't haunt the town for 300 years. Like, she had to be a witch. And this goes back to what we were saying about, I think we were talking about Hocus Pocus one time, where I was like, the story of the Salem witch trials is supposed to be a cautionary tale about how like you can wrongly accuse people and use like zealotry to like drive and this mob mentality to drive people to madness and to do things to innocent people. But every time they try to tell a Salem witch story, there's always a witch. They were right. If she was a witch, then they were right to kill her. The reason why these stories are supposed to be cautionary is because they're supposed to not be witches. The people just think they're a witch. No, I think she had to be a witch. I guess if you go along with the plausible deniability, it could just be that the town made the curse and not her, and she's a part of the curse. But then why is she whispering, and her whispers cause you to commit suicide?
Right. So that's another thing that he doesn't kind of answer the question of, or give you an explanation of, like, what the reason was for the eyes and the mouth. And you kind of get the gist of it. Like, like I said, you said like the whispering and causing suicide. They don't have any clue what her eyes are going to do.
Yeah.
So again, I enjoyed the book and everything. To me, there were some things that didn't make sense or didn't add up, and the eyes and the mouth were one of the things that. So in the story, that at some point, a man and like two women, I think it was, go out into the woods and find her and sew her eyes and mouth shut.
Yeah.
But my question is, number one, how did they do it? Like,
yeah,
I don't understand how they could have gotten that close to her, been able to do it without having the whispers and whatever would happen with her eyes to be able to do that.
And how would it have stuck? Because whenever they do things to her, she disappears and reappears.
Right.
Like she's
reappears.
She's like reset. Like whenever they tear up her dress, whenever she reappears, she's got her dresses back. So like if they sewed up her eyes, it seems like she would have disappeared and reappeared. They wouldn't have been sewn up anymore. So that is interesting. How I didn't even think about that, but that is an interesting kind of loophole in the story. Is there some sort of is there something there with some sort of willingness, or I can't think of the right word, but like also the thing about making a deal with the witch and like her agreeing to it, the whole thing that the father did after the son commits suicide. The lady in the town, Griselda, she'd been making deals with this witch for years and years, and it seems like the witch wasn't listening to her. So like, Why
Right.
why in this scenario with the father did it seem like she kind of made an agreement with him? And
So now I have an idea about that too.
yeah.
But like, yeah, like, so with them sewing up the eyes thing, I think one thing that kind of a writer's like kind of get out of jail free card is that it happened
Oh
a
yeah.
long time ago,
Yeah.
and they don't know the history, so he doesn't have to offer an explanation. You
Yeah.
just know it happened. The other thing is, man, that's a really good thread to last
The last that
300 something years. Like, it's
Yeah.
pretty impressive.
I think if it had been, I think I would have made it part of the original
Right.
punishment, because then it would make sense why it lasted through time too. The same way her dress doesn't decay.
Right.
You know, like it's like 300 years old. The dirt. There's the part where they talk about like the dirt between her fingernails or something like that. Whenever the kids are eating the vegetables or something, and they're like, this has to be 300-year-old dirt that's been preserved from her like disappearing and reappearing over and over again.
Right.
There could have been something there, but yeah, that is weird. I didn't think about
and
that.
The other thing that kind of goes along with that from the past is before her eyes and mouth were sewn shut is how did anybody actually live?
Yeah,
And
before
what I'm saying is like
yeah,
if her purpose is to punish the
yeah,
townspeople of this area, regardless of who they are, like before all they did what they did, then she should have basically killed everybody.
yeah.
And there wouldn't have been a chance. So like again, but you can still explain by not explaining,
Well,
saying, hey, this happened way in the past. We don't have, great records of anything. So
we're like
it is
covering
what it is.
we're like covering all the bad stuff in the beginning, but like the at the end of the book, they kind of tried to do this whole like, oh well, was she really all that bad? She just wants you to see the good in life and all this kind of stuff. And I was thinking, yeah, but she whispers to people and has them kill themselves. Like,
right.
Like there's not like a. It almost made me think of the movie Dogma, where I think it's Alanis Morissette is God at the end of the movie. It was almost like Alanis Morissette is walking into town, and like all of a sudden the witch is Alanis Morissette, and like she's smiling and has like babies under her arm, and she's like, I was just trying to. If you had just cut my eyes open years ago, I was just here to make the place peaceful and plentiful, and it's like. Nothing in this book leading up to this moment gave any clues that as a matter of fact, every clue was to the opposite of that. That I'm not just now going to buy into, oh, you're right. The humans were the real witches all along. And the witch was, she was just good natured and like, no, they were both bad. Obviously the humans did bad things to each other, but I don't think there's any part of what was the witch's name? Dorothy? Not Dorothy.
This witch?
Yeah.
Catherine.
Yeah. Catherine wasn't some kind of like misunderstood like character. Like, I don't believe that for a second.
No, I don't either. I mean, like,
so
what she does, I mean, she is there to punish the people that live in Black Spring. That is what she is meant to do. Now, it would have been interesting to see, kind of jumping all over the book, but like at the end when she takes the two kids, and she turns them into basically her kids.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting to see if those two kids wouldn't have been killed if things would have kind of been more normal, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, how would you even allow this witch to take these two children and like, what are you going to tell the mom? Like, hey, it's for the greater good. Like
they would have put him in the hold or whatever they had.
Right. So like, it was inevitable that at some point, it was going to go off the rails. It just amazing that it didn't take that long. but you know, the interesting thing with what Hex is Hex isn't about a hex. It's about Hex is about basically a police force in this town that was created to monitor and deal with any kind of Catherine situations that might arise.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting how they use, like, you know, they bring in West Point Military Academy because it's right close to this town.
Yeah.
And they kind of help keep things bottled up. And then, like, everyone in town has an iPhone that is specifically for this town, and it has an app on it to where you can, report witch activities and things like that. So
yeah,
you know what's going on. And then the town embraces Catherine, and because it's in an area where, along with Salem, like, there's witch stuff all in the north, or the northeast.
Yeah.
And so they kind of use that as a touristy thing for this town, where, like, yeah, this is where the witch is.
Yeah.
And they use her sometimes as a prop.
Yeah.
Like, if she appears, they're like, "Oh, have your picture taken with the witch," or,
she's like a town mascot.
She's like the town mascot, and, like, no one knows from the wiser, is hiding in plain sight type thing.
Yeah.
And then, like, if she appears somewhere, they send out, like, this hex crew, and they'll, like, they said, like, they'll put, like, a big thing around her so no one can see her too if it's like in a weird situation.
At
or whatever.
Easter, they have a big Easter bunny they put over her or something like that.
Right,
They'll just try to hide her from the public. Yeah, that's really funny. And Hex is like did you ever watch the show Eureka? Where it's like a government funded neighborhood that's full of all these super geniuses, and they have a special, like, police force that is there to kind of keep the town under wraps and keep the secret and keep the peace amongst what's going on with other crazy time bending experiments and stuff. That's kind of like what Hex was to this town.
Right.
The whole first part of the book, I was going to tell you that it reminded me. I made a mental note to remember this. It reminded me a lot of Twin Peaks, like, in a good way, in a positive way. I love Twin Peaks and that whole vibe. So, like, I thought it was a really cool thing. Maybe a little bit. I don't know. There's some parts of Twin Peaks is such a mixed bag. There's some part, I was gonna say maybe a little darker than Twin Peaks, but Twin Peaks has some really serious moments. But, like, the way, like, there's all these, like, characters in the town, and all the characters kind of, like, they fit into, like, a Twin Peaks kind of vibe. It's also a small town horror story.
Right.
The whole thing with, like, the witch, like, being, like, a part of the town, but, like, can't hurt you, but yet there's this mystery behind it. I could just see Agent Cooper rolling in any moment.
Right.
And I really dug that vibe. It also kind of reminded me of Cabin in the Woods a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Where Cabin in the Woods is like this small story that has this huge story underneath, and Cabin in the Woods has the whole thing about the, like, there's the crew of people that are watching everything, and then they're trying to make sure that all the different things happen to appease this god or whatever. That's kind of like Hex had that vibe too, where it was like they were like this secret little group that was kind of like just clocking in, doing their day job. They've been doing this so long, and they've lived, like, they were born in this town, like, they've lived this life for so long that to them, this is just, their 9 to 5 is taking care of this witch all day. And that was probably my favorite vibe of the whole.
One of my favorite characters from the book is Grimm. Like,
oh yeah, me too. Yeah.
I liked him a lot. And, like, Cooper and I read this Hex this last time, the second time I read it. And he was like, at the end, he was like, I just want to know what happened to Grimm. Like, whatever everybody else. I was like, well, I mean, it's pretty much told without being told. I think it's pretty much over. Which I didn't know this, but apparently he's written a book called Echo and another book. Oh God, I can't remember what it was called. And okay, so this book he's Dutch. So it was originally written in Dutch and takes place over there. And the Grimm character in the follow-up book apparently reappears and somehow
Oh, really?
in in the Dutch version, which they don't say, he somehow escapes.
Wow.
Now,
huh?
I don't know. And I told you before the endings of the original Dutch version is different than this one, but he's gone back since and changed the Dutch version to fit this version, apparently.
Wow.
So, and we'll after it's over, I'll tell you. I looked it up to see what the difference was.
Yeah, I want to talk about that.
It's not a lot different, but there's definitely some differences.
Okay.
But yeah, like so maybe good news for Robert Grimm. And you know, I love some of the names of people. Like Grimm, obviously Grimm fairy tales. Cotton, what was his whatever, but like Cotton he's the the Puritan fire and brimstone preacher, and Cotton is like what you think of when you think of those preachers. And like Griselda is that's a witch from what, Wizard of Oz, I believe.
I think so.
So like a lot of the names are kind of like, fit the different characters. And then like so one of the things with this curse, and we kind of alluded to, you can't, if you live in this town or if you stay a certain amount of time, you are there and you can't leave. So growing up in this day and age with technology and the internet and all this stuff, the some of the kids in this town are not happy with the fact that the way their town works is how it's supposed to be. And Tyler, who is one of the main characters, Steven's son, he and his friends have decided to do like experiments and stuff on it, make a YouTube channel that's a secret YouTube channel that only like they know about. But their hopes are that they can do these experiments and then maybe go to, say, the West Point people, or there's like a council too that are kind of like over the witch. They're over like the Hex organization and stuff. And they maybe want to try and convince them that, hey, maybe that science has come a long way. Maybe there's a way that we can break this curse, but we can't do it unless we announce to the world that this is happening, and all the greatest minds in the world,
or even
if together.
Even if they can just let the world know this is happening in their town, then that even if they can't lift the curse, it still changes their lives forever, because they no longer have to keep this secret. It can just the rest of the world will just know that this town has this thing, and you can't mess with the witch. And it's very unlikely this is the only town in the world. They might find out that there are other towns,
right?
South Africa, where there's a witch going around because of some curse that happened there. There's a town in France that has, what I mean? Like they could have found, and I really thought that is where the story was going to. I thought this story was going to take that turn, and I'm kind of surprised that it didn't. Where I expected it to go was the kids do release to all the knowledge to the public, and it causes, or they release something, but it's not necessarily believed by the public. But then the entire town turns on these teenagers, and it becomes a story about like how they, whatever they do to these teenagers to keep the secret. I thought that was going to be the fold that the story took, which that's one kind of subject that we could talk about in the book is how the humans interact with each other in order to uphold the curse, and how they treat each other. I think that,
so they haven't. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think that they are cruel to each other more so than anything. Until the end of the book, where it's absolute Armageddon. Prior to that, other than listening to her whispers and committing suicide and committing violence, she really just kind of hangs out. The real violence in the book is from the humans,
Right.
trying to keep the secret and keep people quiet, locking people away so that they can't, they can't go mad and tell their family members. Because that's another thing too, is the people that live in this town, they still have family members outside of the town.
Outside of the town. That they can't go visit, and that they can't.
Right.
Or you can go somewhere for like
half a day and come back. Yeah, well, you can't go anywhere for a long time.
I think there was one time when they talked about
they went on vacation.
They went away for like,
I can't remember.
They were supposed to be gone for 2 weeks or something like that, and after like a week and a little bit more, they started getting those feelings, so they came back. And like, the proximity to the town, the further away apparently you are, the worse it gets. And so they follow this charter that was written like 100, 200 years ago or whatever, because I think she's been cursed. She's been like doing the curse thing for about 350 years.
Right.
At this point in the book. Yep. And then like at some point when Black Springs, springs up, and then like everyone, realizes what's happening with the witch, they come up with like a town charter of rules to deal with the curse.
Yeah.
And in however many years since that was written, those rules have not changed. And I think that's one of the things that the younger generation was also frustrated with, is that they're not keeping up with the times as far as like adapting that charter to meet like what we now deal with here in I don't even know when this, I think it's supposed to be like 2011 or 12, somewhere in there. And so like some of the things that they do, some of the crazy things that the townspeople do, they justify it by saying, oh, well, it's just part of the charter and this is how it's always been done. And, we can't go against the charter, and like, so Tyler, who's the Steven's son, has his group of friends that they do this thing. One of them's Jaden, and he's a little bit psycho. I mean, like, and it grows obviously with what happens to him. But so once they get caught, as far as doing their experiments, and then there's a scene where they're poking her with sticks and throwing rocks at her, and they knock her down into this like well thing, and they're throwing rocks at her, and she won't disappear because of the peacock.
She has a peacock.
Yes. But like finally she disappears, and Tyler.
That was another Twin Peaks thing. That's what I was trying to think of earlier that I couldn't think of. Which she spends a few chapters carrying the peacock around in a plastic bag.
Dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, at this point, like Tyler and Jaden have gone on opposite ends. Tyler realizes that they shouldn't be. His idea was to do like just experiments, but not like mess with her.
Yeah.
And Jaden's father had left when he was a child, and decided that he couldn't take it anymore. So he just leaves and refuses to come back, and obviously kills himself, because if you don't come back, you're going to be dead. So he's he blames the witch obviously for his father's death, and he is bound and determined to take out his frustrations on her and punish her for that, even though like it's one of those things where his father was very abusive to him and his mom, but he had that weird relationship that people have with their abusers sometimes, where they still love them and, see no wrong and things like that.
Yeah, with your parents, you look past a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so like Tyler and Jaden have, now come to a conflict. So um, Tyler records what Jaden and two of his other friends do with her at that time, and then he eventually, turns them in, and they. So one of the punishments that the town has is they have this prison that they call Doodletown, and it is just outside of the city limits, but it's really, really close. And so they put them in there, and they get like a small sampling of that feeling that is given to people when they leave town, but it's not enough to where they'll actually commit suicide, but it's bad enough to where it drives you insane, essentially. And plus they, they whip out the cat and nine tails and publicly flog them. And like, this is when the idea of what is the witch's true, like, evilness is because she shows up and everyone's thinking like, oh, she's here to see the punishment, like, to make sure that these kids got what they deserved for doing what they did to her. But it's more like she was there to witness how far these people have like gone over the deep end and how they act, and like they like that, it's like to her they deserve what she's doing to them because the true horror are the townspeople, and there's just one more reason for me to inflict as much damage as I can to these people. And the whole scene of them, being flogged and all that, it was just, I mean, that was brutal. Like,
it's
like,
hard.
You could see it. Like, I kept thinking of like medieval times where, dirt roads and a wooden scaffolding, and like, it was just throwing vegetables and all that stuff. You tree.
So I think that there's a couple themes from both those sections of the book. One is the whole thing between Jaden and Tyler. They both hate the circumstances they're in, and neither one of them like the witch or think the witch is like a good thing.
Right.
But yet Tyler doesn't see the pleasure, or he doesn't have the need to like cause cruelty. Like, you can think that somebody, it sort of makes you think of things like torture, and like, the reason why torture is illegal according to the Geneva Convention and all that. Yeah. You can have an enemy but not be cruel to them. You know what I mean? Like, the witch, cruelty, Tyler didn't take any pleasure in that cruelty, and he knew it was wrong, even if he didn't think that the witch was like a good person. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
I mean, she killed his dog.
Yeah, she killed his dog.
And like, he still didn't like.
Yeah.
He realized that wasn't.
Like, the thing I can think about is there was a time at work where someone wanted me to watch a video of somebody getting arrested, and it was like one of those like sovereign citizen people where they like tell the cops like, I don't agree with your law and all this kind of stuff. And it's like it was a woman, and he started watching the video, and I said, bro, I just don't find this funny, like, I can't watch this. And he said, yeah, but she's crazy. Like, she thinks she's like above the law and doesn't have to. And I was like, I understand that, but I still don't want to watch her suffer. And that's kind of like the way I feel like Tyler was in that moment, is like it's one thing to know that the witch is like a bad deity in this situation, but it's a whole nother to like say, but I'm going to take pleasure in watching her suffer. And so I think that was one of the differences between Jaden and Tyler's character. But then another topic that you touched on with it kind of goes into sort of what do you think? Let me tell you what my theory is, and then you can give me yours if you have one. But the theme of the book to me, I haven't quite worked it all out, and I don't know that it's like completely intentional by the author, but I don't think he was ignoring it either. But there is this whole aspect of like God in the witch, like Griselda asking the witch for things, making sacrifices to it, like she's talking to it. She doesn't know whether it's listening to her. She's just like looking for any acknowledgement, just any sign that the witch is listening to her in any way. I mean, it's like someone praying, not knowing if anyone's listening.
Oh, definitely.
Like the way,
and it turns out she wasn't the only one till you find out later that other people were doing similar things with
right.
her.
Yeah, exactly. This ever present, like, like this ever present being that is not necessarily influencing anything in any direction, and yet influences everything just because of its existence,
Right.
The townspeople during the cat o' nine tails scene, and cat o' nine tails, that is a biblical reference in that, because I mean they flogged Jesus with cat o' nine tails.
Right.
Like the townspeople, because she shows up, they think she's there to make sure they're doing what they believe is the right thing. For all they know, they're doing the wrong thing, and she's there to see them doing the wrong thing. Like there's no real way for them to know her intentions. And yet them not knowing is what drives the mom mentality and what drives their actions through the whole book.
Yes.
And so I know that every book we read, I see some religious like meaning in all of it, but I just grew up around all of that. But like, so I probably put it in places that it's not really there, but like, I
definitely think it's there.
Yeah, I could see that theme. And the end of the book takes place in a burning church. And she is like, she's pointing at the church, telling him to go there. Like it seems to me like that is an intentional, an intentional play. And
I'll talk about it like, if we talk about the end of the book, but like, the church was supposed to be a sanctuary too.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out it wasn't.
Yeah, right.
And it has to do with sacrifice. And again, there's a lot of the theme of sacrifice in this book. Because for one thing we talked about already with Griselda, she is definitely thinks of Catherine as a deity, godlike entity.
Mm-hmm.
She takes pate to her for whatever.
There's a few times in the book where she chooses the Catherine over her son.
Over her son. That's what I was saying. Yeah. She is willing to sacrifice him on multiple occasions to appease Catherine.
Who's the dude in the Bible that takes his son to the mountain to sacrifice him?
Yeah.
Because God tells him. In that story, we're supposed to believe that God is the righteous one because he gave him an out so that he didn't have to kill his son when he was the one asking him to kill his son to begin with.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, like, so like she eventually does sacrifice her son.
Yeah.
Like, she allows him to be killed.
Yeah.
And but there's different things, like, she does go out and treat her like this entity, and she's given sacrifices, but she's also like like a sounding board for all of her troubles too, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Almost like her psychologist that she's going to see.
Yeah.
And then like, Griselda's a very interesting character. Like, but
probably my second favorite character in the book.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
She comes up with this strange idea that, and again, it was a biblical thing about peacocks. And
what was the thing with the peacock? I mean, I remember her sacrificing the peacock, but
she had read something. I can't. I'd have to look it up.
I might have missed that, or I don't remember it.
She looked something up, and in one of the, I want to say it's one of the books in the Old Testament, and it wasn't a peacock, but she did like the kind of leap of, this is this. Oh, well, this is similar to this, so I'll just get a peacock. And so, like, she goes out and steals a peacock and brings it and presents it to Catherine. And for the first time ever, Catherine has a reaction to this peacock. And so now she thinks, now Griselda has gone from like, I'm doing these things and I'm not getting any reaction from God, to I made this sacrifice and God has actually finally reacted to me.
Yeah.
I'm the chosen one. I am, the vessel that Catherine has chosen to do whatever. And so she goes off the deep end. It kind of drives her insane. Not that she wasn't insane before, because, she kills a guy at the beginning of the book. That, it's one of those things too. Like that part was interesting, where someone's getting older and they're having dementia, and they start talking out of their head. And so the town is afraid that he's going to say the wrong thing to the wrong people. So they essentially lock him up. And then eventually she kills him. Yeah. And the preacher, Cotton, is just like, it's probably for the best. She did a good thing. And then they just kind of cover it up, and they have a big town meeting, and, about what to do, give them a burial, and, all that's so interesting. Like, again, it's the mob mentality. Like, everybody, is all for what happened, and like very few voices of reason are in this crowd, and which happens to be Tyler's dad and his best friend's dad, but they're almost ostracized for saying those things. And it even got to the point where his wife is like, you just need to sit down and shut up, or something's bad is going to happen to us if you keep talking against these things.
So what did so the chaos, so what did you think about, I know you really liked the sort of the chaos ending, the Armageddon ending, where everything just goes completely awry, and the townspeople go mad. She's walking around getting rid of everybody visions, and people are committing suicide. People are trying to leave the town and they can't. People are trying to people that don't live in the town subconsciously just don't want to go to the town.
Don't want to go there, yeah.
And they're just trapped in this. Within a matter of like a day, the entire town just like implodes and kills itself.
Right. Which, so, for anybody that's listening that doesn't care about spoilers or has listened or read this before, Jaden, one of the experiments they do is they record the voice of Catherine with a phone on a stick, and then after everything happens with Jaden being whipped and then put in Doodle Town and all this, he's basically gone completely insane.
Yeah, and
he takes his vengeance on Tyler, who he blames for all this, and he sneaks into his house. While Tyler's asleep, he plays the recording in Tyler's ear, and Tyler commits suicide. And kind of the blowback aftershock kind of thing is Tyler's brother was kind of got the after effects or the minor effects of it, and which is, I think, is even more brutal, is he like glues his eyes and shut and ears and just really like goes crazy.
I had a question about, I don't want to do a play of the whole book, but like I wanted to talk about open questions I had, and that was one of the open questions. Was they never said that Jaden, it's obvious that it was Jaden, but they never said it was Jaden that held the phone up to Tyler's ear.
Right.
And so I'm sure it was Jaden. That explains Tyler's death. But I don't understand what did Matt have to do with anything unless Jaden went into his room and did the same thing.
Well, that's my question, was that too, because like I get it that, because I want to say they explained somewhere that their bedrooms are next to each other.
Yeah.
And that maybe that they could hear each other through the walls or something like that. Maybe I'm just putting my own thoughts in my head, but I wondered the same thing, because if he's playing that, it's a whisper, and so
yeah,
it would have to be, if that was the case, it would have to be loud enough to where that sound would travel through a wall and to where Matt could hear it.
But then also Matt was eating the mushrooms from the fairy circle thing.
Right.
Which had to be made by the witch. Nothing Jaden would have done could have caused that.
Right. That was the other question too that I had, was like where that came from. And you know, she shows up at the house, but it's not until after Tyler's dead. And so that was very kind of,
I didn't understand,
vague, open-ended. But some of the reviews and things I read where people were arguing about whether it was Jaden or not, and like I think he pretty much
had to
says
be Jaden.
It is like he's the only one that had the recording or knew about the recording. I mean, it could have been one of those other two friends.
I thought it was going to turn out to be Griselda.
Or it could have, and like one person said they thought it might be the mom, but I didn't like. There's nowhere
where that would come from.
Right. The one thing is, like, no one knew about the recording except for the kids that did it. And so if it wasn't
probably not even Griselda, probably.
Yeah, like, because if the council would have known, they would have gotten rid of that. And which is the other weird thing, because even Cooper asked me this. He was like, well, when they caught Jaden, why didn't they wipe his phone? And I was like, I have no idea. Like, that would have made sense, because he said they went through and deleted like videos and things like that, but they didn't delete audio files, because I guess they didn't figure there would be anything to do with the witch in the audio file. But he was like, well, why wouldn't they just reset his phone? And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But again, that's like an author's like kind of get out of jail thing, like, and whatever.
So the thing that I didn't like about the ending with the whole Armageddon apocalypse thing was there was all these threads that were left open, and I kept listening to the book as if it was going to be this, mystery, and all these pieces were going to fall into place. There was going to be this greater story that linked everything together. And then instead of giving an ending that would have like pulled things together, it seems like everything that happened was inconsequential to. I understand that the dad made a deal and he cut the stitches off and all that stuff, and I actually liked that part of the story. But it happened too soon. Like, we didn't get enough of the father had this epiphany that he realized that Jaden must have been somehow responsible for what happened, but he never figured out how. He never figured out any of the connections. He goes straight to helping the witch kill the town, and because of that, we never learned what happens. And that was the thing that kind of left me like I don't know how I feel about the book.
So there was early on, there's a kind of, and which is also weird to me. And like, I only have one child, and I know you only have one child. So, but there's this interesting conversation that Steven and his wife and Matt
Oh,
and
yeah.
Tyler have, where they discuss essentially like, would you sacrifice me to save the town, or would you say like, it's basically like, who would you let die to make sure this would happen or this would happen? And like the other thing is they let you know that Tyler was Steven's son, and Matt was I can't remember, Jocelyn, that was her name.
Yeah,
It was
Jocelyn.
Jocelyn's son. And like, he even says a few times, like, you shouldn't have a favorite kid, but he's the favorite kid for me, and Matt's the favorite kid for her. And it's not that I don't love Matt, but he's not Tyler. And once Tyler is, in essence murdered by Jaden, I think he also blames what happened to Jaden on the town as a whole, because they allowed the punishment of the flogging and the Doodletown thing to happen. And so he doesn't see the value of letting the town continue. And therefore he is willing to, free Catherine's full wrath, essentially. So he, and Catherine, obviously realizes this and comes to Stephen, and, he cuts the threads. And then, like, what I thought was very interesting is once he cuts the threads and from her mouth and eyes, she won't look at him. She purposely spares him. And I think for a couple of reasons. For number one, for doing what he did. And also the reason that she showed up after Tyler's death is because I think, she's undead, obviously. What kind of thinking does she have, and what kind of knowledge of what's happening around her does she have? I mean, that's brought up a few times, but I think she understands that somehow what happened, her voice was used against Tyler, and she probably doesn't understand it. Obviously, she doesn't know technology, but she knows that his death could be attributed to her in some way, and that wasn't. She didn't do that on purpose, and therefore she was going to spare Stephen. And his other reasoning in doing it was he felt that since she was able to bring her son back to life, that she would be able to bring Tyler back to life if he helped her.
Absolutely.
And so he does, obviously, and then she won't look at him, and he leaves, she leaves, and again, this is where the whole thing, what would have happened if the town would have left well enough alone at this point. Like they know now that that her eyes and mouth are open, and she takes these kids, and she, when it first happens, and a darkness falls over the town, everyone knows, okay, it's finally happened, it's coming, and they're all waiting, and they're thinking okay, any second now, a meteor is going to crash into Black Springs, we're all going to die, something. And then nothing happens, and so they're all standing around well, what's going on? I thought we were all supposed to die, 5 seconds after she's released. And even that fed into it, the idea that something's coming is even more frightful now than it was before. And they start going crazy. And then when she takes the two kids, would if they would have just left her alone and let her have these two kids, would they have all lived happily ever after in some way, shape, or form? But one of the townspeople who had the bright idea earlier of wanting to try and shoot her, even though she's dead, and shooting her wasn't going to do anything, decides he's going to sneak up on her and try and kill her, and he winds up shooting the kids. And so now she's had her original children taken from her, and now she's had her new children taken from her, and that was the catalyst to release the Fury. And so, like, you know, everything's going crazy. Steven doesn't know what to do. And the other thing is the owl, the little
owl
fur ball,
yeah,
the owl pellet, like, obviously that is supposed to be Steven, or not Steven, Tyler.
Yeah.
And it's going to, you know, somehow grow into Tyler. And like, cause you know, I think he says like he recognizes the hair, like, it's, you know, that's Tyler's hair or whatever. And he knows that his wife and Matt, Jocelyn and Matt, are somewhere, and that's what kind of where, you know, it all comes to a crescendo as he goes out there, and like there's just people going crazy, and like, and you know, the interesting thing is too is the children were spared, which is another weird thing. But anyway, and then the people that were kind of outspoken against what the town was going through, they all hide in the church. And you know, she points to the church, you know, saying, hey, basically, hey, your wife and child are in the church, kind of like, maybe you should go get them. And I really liked Steven up until this point. I thought he was a good character, and I didn't even have anything really against him cutting the threads. But then he goes in the church and he sees them in the church, and he leaves them to die because the people outside are essentially burning the church.
Yeah.
And he knows that he can escape the burning by, what is it, going down in the basement or something like that. And he just walks. He looks at everybody, looks at them, and they're expecting him to rescue them. And he just goes down the basement and shuts and locks the door so that they can't come, because in his mind, it's Tyler, and he can't do anything to risk, you know, not being able to get Tyler back, even to the point of sacrificing his son and wife, which comes back to the early theme of, at the beginning, who would you sacrifice?
Yeah.
And he made that decision because I think, you know, his answer at the beginning was like, I wouldn't sacrifice either one of you, or, you know, kind of like
he just says like it's of course the person familiar to you, you feel more loss by losing them versus an entire town of people that you don't know.
Right.
But he was saying that, like, also you have to weigh the life of one versus the entire town. And, you know, he basically just says like, this is a silly question. I don't want to do this whole thing.
Yeah. And then, you know, when it comes up, he sacrifices the town for his one child.
So the interesting thing about that whole situation, and what I think the kind of the meaning of the concept of the book is, a lot of times you may ponder that question of, what would I do to save my own son or my own child? Would I be willing to, you know, let 10 people die if I knew that it meant saving my son, you know? And most people, if they're being honest, 10 faceless people is not as valuable as the one that they're familiar with. And the concept of the book is yeah, but whatever you did to get there, you're going to see in the eyes of your child. They're going to look at you now as the person that made that decision. And would you be willing to save your son and like live on with that? Could you show yourself, which is the ending of the book, where whenever there's a knock at the door, and of course you think, well, is it Tyler? Is it the witch? Who's it going to be at the door? And then Stephen, out of guilt of everything he did to get to this point, to save his son, can't look his son in the eye. Like he can't look him in the face after what he's done. And that's what
so he's his eyes up.
Yep. So let's talk about the ending. So for one thing, let's talk about the ending that is in this version of the book, and then I want to hear from you what the other one is.
So you got the ending as far as the ending of the town itself. So like, you know, there's all of the death and destruction happening in and around where the church is and all this stuff, and people are committing suicide, people are killing each other, people are like burning, like all this crazy stuff. And then at some point, the people that are left all have this vision that they walk into is it the Hudson
River?
Yeah, they all, as like lemmings, essentially walk themselves into the Hudson River and drown. And they said they were finding bodies like downstream, like by the hundreds or whatever. And so that's essentially wipes out, everybody. Like, and what's crazy too is they're talking about like, people that happen to be out of town were leaping from buildings and, driving their cars into like buildings and brick walls and stuff like that. So, I mean, essentially everybody in Black Springs dies except for Stephen. Allegedly, they don't mention anybody else, but essentially it's Stephen and possibly Tyler coming back. And which, like, it is kind of like a weird, I don't say weird, but like, you go through all the book and then like everybody just dies and you're kind of like, so, I kind of get the thing where like, it's kind of like it's not anticlimactic because it's definitely climatic, but yeah, it's like kind of I don't know how to describe it. It just ends.
I don't know, man. I don't, to be completely honest with you, like, I don't want to go too hard because I know you like this book a lot, but the most boring part of the entire book to me was that section. Like, I mean, because citizens of a town just like mindlessly killing themselves for seemingly no reason, and it has no connection to the prior story that we just read. It's not, to me, it's not that interesting. Like I was on a treadmill listening to this part of the book, and I was just like ready to get through it. I found the story of the characters and how they were doing things behind the scenes, and they all had these different motivations, and there's all these plots that are going together. And none of that came to any fruition except for they just lost their minds and started killing themselves. Like I really thought that was kind of lame. If I'm being completely honest. And like, the least climactic part of the entire book.
Yeah, I mean, some of the walking into the water thing was definitely
if they were
different.
If they were going to do like at that point in the book, then I thought it was poetic. But I thought all this should have happened like after we got more of a story. Like, it's like we got half a story, and then he was just like, well, I got to get this book out. So I guess they all killed themselves.
I think that the purpose that I get out of it for why everyone died is kind of that thing where they had a choice at some point and they chose, you chose wrong. And so like they were they got what they chose. Whether they don't think they knew that they were all going to die essentially, but that, they did the things that they did, and that's what they sow from those decisions. And I think it was like, I think it was his way of saying like, um, you know, they were the bad guys, and they just kind of got what they deserved. Now I do think that it should have been like maybe some more people that lived, or like maybe not outright saying this person survived. Maybe leave it a little open ended as far as like who did what. Now there is, like I said, the difference. There's a different Dutch version and an American version. And in the Dutch version, there's like these pits, and so like one thing is like in the Dutch version it said that like I guess there was, instead of West Point, there were like police, because there were in that version there's police in the town when everything starts going crazy, and she's walking down the road with the kids, and the police opened fire on her and wound up killing the kids, and that's what was the catalyst to start that. Now in the thing it said that, and I didn't quite understand, because the person that wrote the synopsis was Dutch themselves, and so like some of their English wasn't the best, and like I didn't quite understand some things, but it basically said like the Steven character comes up on the ridge too, and he looks down, and there's a mountain, and I don't under. This is where kind of the translation, I'm sure, but it says there's a mountain of children, who are all being spared. And I don't get the mountain. I guess it's
that was like, in the.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, and there's like, I'm trying to visualize it. That's, I guess, what I'm having. Like, I'm like a big hill, like just kids piled up on each other.
That's in the. That's in the. Yeah, it's in the American version. And it is hard it is hard to visualize. I was like,
and so like, so there's the pile of kids, and then like, they wound up killing all the children. The townspeople, wind up killing all the children, and so like that's when she starts bringing down the hellfire from the sky, and there's like, meteors or whatever, like fireballs raining from heaven, and crashing and killing and burning everybody. And there's somehow these pits, and the Steven character is like running down, and he's got a manhole cover, it said, like over his head, to protect himself from the fire. And he comes across a pit that has his wife and child in it, and he could have gone in there and essentially died with them, but instead he left them and got into his own pit that was somehow protected, in which I didn't understand how his was protected versus whatever. But it's like he hid and like survived everything, but it didn't say anything about them like walking into a river or anything like that. It just basically was like fire and brimstone just rained down and killed everybody. And like, she was apparently, and I think they do allude to this in the American versions, like she was giving people the plague.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people were like basically instantly dying, and there was like giant rats all over the town.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the things were similar.
Yeah.
But the church thing, there wasn't a church thing, and there wasn't the river thing, or at least that they mentioned. And then I think they did leave some more open-ended questions about if everybody died or not from what the person was saying. And of course, like a lot of they were talking about a lot of the smaller details that wouldn't translate to an American audience had to have been changed to Americanize it versus, being Dutch. Obviously, a lot of the names are different, things like that. But other than that, it was like essentially saying like I think they added in the part where Stephen sews his eyes up. They said that wasn't in the book.
Oh, really? Okay.
But it's in, like, if you get the Dutch version now, it's in there.
Huh.
So that's something he added later when he wrote the translation for the American version. And I can't remember if it was something else about Tyler too, that was a little bit different as far as, I think he actually, I might be misremembering this, but I think he actually sees Tyler and at the end of this, but it's kind of like the monkey paw thing. Like,
yeah,
it's Tyler, but it's not Tyler kind of thing. And
that's what I was curious about, is if in the Dutch version he actually answers the door or he sees Tyler.
I think they changed. I think he changed it to be a little bit more vague as far as like, because that's, I don't know if you know the monkey paw thing, but I think that's like, obviously a throwback because the knocking on the door and not knowing what's on the other side of the door. And instead of being able to wish it away, he can sew his eyes shut so he doesn't have to see what's on the other side of the door. Go
ahead. Is there more?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's just, I like that part of it. I like that part of it a lot, with him and Tyler at the end. Like, and there was a lot of debate that I saw in reviews too, about, like, is it like real, or like did he sew his eyes shut because, and I think he doesn't want to see Tyler, but did he also do that because he was now taking on Catherine's curse, and what did he now in turn become?
That's what I think.
Catherine 2.0. And I think that could be very legitimate too.
I liked the ending of the book. I liked how the knock at the door was never answered. I don't think I would have liked it as much if it had been like a monkey paw thing where he sees like a undead version of his son.
Right.
I liked that they left it open. I liked that they didn't show.
I do too.
And I also like the concept that he is now the witch, that instead of facing his son, he's so scared to face his son after what he's done that he becomes the witch.
Now, see, when the one thing I have with that too is we said that Catherine was a witch previously, and it's like, was she a witch or wasn't she, or did the circumstances cause it? But if you say that now Stephen becomes her, he wasn't a witch beforehand.
Yeah,
the circumstances caused it,
and there could be
so that's why I'm like, I'm wishy-washy on whether or not she truly was a witch.
Yeah, I'm kind of wishy-washy too, because now that we're talking about that, what if Catherine was just? What if there was a similar story 300 years ago? I don't know how you would play it into what happened with her kids, but somehow
she had to murder her own child. Like,
but what I'm saying is, could there have been something that happened similar to this where
it was passed on to her?
It was passed on to her. Yeah. Like there was somebody else that was cursed before her.
Well, there is the thing where, she didn't live in town. She lived out in, the woods with just her two kids, and maybe something happened and she decided to stay away, and she was brought into everything because of her children.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also I love the historical part of this book was really cool, where like the Indians wouldn't go near this place, and like they knew the woods were cursed, and um and yeah, I mean, because maybe even before then, before settlers got there, the Indians stayed away from there even before that, because there was something about this area that was just evil, and maybe it did affect her, and then it just gets passed on and on. And the question is now, like, how would it be kept a secret? Obviously, if people are hundreds of people are washing up downstream in the Hudson, like, you can't really like keep that under wraps.
And the whole town, there's going to be this
deserted town with full of like dead people, and that obviously something happened.
A modern what would it be like? This would make an interesting story concept, and someone probably has done this, but a modern day Roanoke, Virginia, where it's like 2024, an entire city of people just disappear. They leave one note on the side of a building that says, like, we'll be back in 2 months, right? Or whatever it was the note said at Roanoke, and then they're gone forever.
What was it, Croatan or whatever?
I don't remember what the Roanoke note said that they wrote.
I'm pretty sure it was CROA.
Oh, was it just some kind of weird word?
Something very vague. Yes.
Oh wow, that's crazy. Yeah.
Croatoan or something.
Huh.
And no one has any clue what it meant. Like, to this day, like,
that's crazy.
But yeah, like, I mean, what would happen? There's, again, overall, I've really, really liked the book. I think it is a very good, like, tale of what humans are capable of. Obviously, that's the overriding theme is, how humanity can be brutal, and how humans, especially in a group mentality, are capable of horrific things. And again, like, so there's a few things that didn't make sense to me, just in the storytelling thing. One is Catherine's patterns versus her randomness. So, like so when Tyler and them first do their experiment, they know that Catherine walks down this particular sidewalk or whatever it was at this particular time, all the time, at this particular thing. So they move that pole into her way, just to see how she would react to something, stopping her normal routine.
Right.
But then at other times, she's just all these different places, and she shows up at all these random places. And I'm like, well, does she have a pattern, or is everything random? Because they, like, several times the people with Hex, so we know where she's going to be.
Yeah.
And, like, but then they also have an app so people can report where she is. And it's like, well, do you know where she's going to be, or is it all random? You can't have it both ways. And maybe there's more to it he just doesn't explain. Like, maybe only on every other Thursday she's doing the same thing, but all the other times she's showing up at, like, random people's houses and things. So that I had a lot of trouble with that part. Just I wasn't, like, it felt like he wasn't remembering things he had written, or ideas he'd come up with, and just whatever was convenient at the time was, how it was going to be. And then the one thing one death that I was extremely disappointed in was Cotton's death.
Yeah.
Like,
He just
out of
commits suicide,
everybody,
right?
he just commits suicide, and you don't even like. You just hear from it third hand, like third party. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, man, like you built this guy up to be like
Yeah.
this Bible thumping, like what you think of from Salem witchcraft trials and like everything, and you build him up to be this like just horrible like person, and you're like, I remember reading it the first time. I was like, man, I can't wait until she kills this dude. Like, I
Yeah.
want her to like literally like get out of the chains and strangle him and look him in the eyes and like beams come out and melt his face like Raiders of the Lost Ark type thing.
Yeah.
And then it's just like it happens and he runs away and you find out he like jumps off of his house or whatever it was, like the deck or something. I was like, well, wow, that was more anticlimactic to me than everyone walking into the water.
Yeah.
I feel like I was cheated out of like what should have been like a really brutal death that normally would have happened.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
agree with that.
and so like, you know, I did have a few issues with, you know, obviously it wasn't perfect, but I think overall, just the concept of the book, the you know, it was like two stories, like I said before, like you got the story and then Tyler commits suicide, and then it's like a whole different story from that point on.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I like the first part up until, well, probably a little bit after the suicide.
Mm-hmm.
But once the violent stuff starts, I liked it. You know, and I think the more reason I liked it was because it was unexpected. Like, you know, the whole time you're thinking like, okay, Catherine is going to like spare people, or maybe she wasn't, you know, maybe they had it wrong the whole time and, you know, whatever. And then like, no, she's kills everybody. And it was just, you know, it was one of those that it was unexpected. And you don't really see a lot of books where essentially every single character dies except for one.
Yeah.
Which is like, oh, you know, just a strange concept to me. And so it was kind of like out of the blue type. And so, I mean, I did like that part, but, you know, the very ending and the whole probably 3/4 of the book I thought were just fantastic.
Yeah.
And
My opinion of the book, it reminds me of a movie that most of the time I would say is one of my favorite movies, but the truth is that it's for this, just like this book, it's there's things I love about it, and then there's things that I'm disappointed about. And I think that because you love parts of it so much is why you're disappointed so much in the other parts.
right,
But it reminds me of the movie Tusk, by Kevin Smith, and that
right,
there are parts of the movie that are like some of the best scenes in any horror movie I've ever seen. And I love the pacing of certain parts of it. And then there are parts where it's just like, this cannot be the same movie.
right,
And this book is not quite to that extreme, but it's the same feeling where it's like, I love the beginning so much. I love the story that was being developed. I just felt like it was cut too short. I felt like I was okay with the ending, the way it played out. Everything that happens after the suicide, I just wish that after the suicide there had been more of solving the mystery of who played the sound to, like, of Steven finding out who played the
right,
sound in his son's ear, why his other son was also affected by the witch, what happened there. I wish there was more of a story to fill more of these gaps, because it makes me feel like, well, the whole half of the book was an interesting concept, but paid very little consequence to how the book ended up,
right.
Yeah, I just wish I wish there was more there. I wish the book had been a little bit longer or split into two books or something like
Right.
that. But ultimately, I was okay with the town kind of like having the fate that it had. I just wish there had been more development between the
Well,
suicide and that moment. And I
yeah,
actually and I liked the ending. I liked the ending of the book with the knock at the door, so in the eyes. I was down
yes.
for all of that. I thought that was a good ending.
My the once he cut the strings and released her, I was again, I'm kind of with you. I had no problem with the uh town and everyone in it dying. I wish there would have been like almost like a Walking Dead type thing where like Grim and maybe the Jocelyn and Matt and maybe like the neighbor or something, like maybe a few people were like there was more of like they were trying to survive and get through, like because you had it in a small tidbit with them being in the church and people trying to get to them. And maybe if that would have just been expanded more, that would have been okay. But I would have loved to have seen like a a, a more of a confrontation between Stephen and Jocelyn,
Yeah.
and like more than just him looking at them and then
Mm-hmm.
turning away and walking down the steps. Like I felt that part was anticlimactic. I mean, she realizes at that point that he's sacrificing them, but like
What if something had happened where after his son commits suicide, Stephen figures out, through a couple chapters of trying to put the pieces together, he figures out that it was Jaden or Griselda that played the tape, and he wants to kill Jaden, like he wants to enact revenge, and then the townspeople, the Cotton, makes a decision that in order to keep the secret that he can't do that and that he has to keep his mouth shut and he has to keep telling the outside world that his son committed suicide and that he wasn't killed by this witch. And out of like just spite and desperation, he goes to the witch and makes the deal like, I'll cut your eyes, I'll cut the stitches
right,
off your eyes, I'll cut the stitches off your mouth if you'll go kill Griselda, Jaden, and Cotton. And in turn, she kills the entire city. And then
right,
and then at the end of the book, he has to face his son with that guilt. That to me, that like I wanted something like that.
yeah. I mean, I totally get that. And I did the one part with Griselda and Jaden, I did like in this book where with she kind of
She doesn't open the door
secretly
for him.
nonchalantly sneaks back in the thing and shuts it, and like
Yeah,
that to me was really brutal because like he comes
she
to
did
that
the opposite.
realization too.
She
You're right.
Yeah, so Steven was willing to kill the entire town to save his son. She wasn't willing to kill herself to save her son.
Right.
Yeah.
And like the
And it probably wouldn't have saved them. Probably would have killed them both anyway.
no, exactly. And then like he's the mommy, saying mommy and all that stuff that was pretty brutal. But yeah, I wish that one section would have been longer and a little bit more detailed. But again, it was a cool thing that you really don't see in books a lot, where there's just total destruction on an entire town for something. So, I mean, overall, I mean, I'm probably like a 4 out of 5 on this book. It's now that I found out that there's actually some other books, I'm kind of interested to maybe read a synopsis and decide if I wanted to try and read them or not. I mean, a lot of people like it. George R. R. Martin said he liked it. Stephen King said he recommends this book. So, and I hear that there's been talks of a movie in development for this book for a while.
I think that a movie or a limited series,
a limited series, yes,
would be really good for it. And the types of stuff that I'm complaining about, they could fix in a
yes.
in a retelling. You know what I mean? They're not, so they would need to. If it was a limited series, they'd have to probably to stretch it out to be a whole series.
Right. And
Yeah.
there's enough to stretch it out. You could get more into the kids and their experiments, and add a lot more to the history of what happened to her back in the day and things like that. Kind of like a flashback, you know, do like Lost, where like you got the story going, and then there's like a flashback.
You do flashbacks before
1600s and in different times. And
man, have you what? Let's finish out Hex. I gotta ask you something at the end of the show, but I don't know. I can't give it a bad. It's hard for me to give a grade because there's enough good there that I hate to say it's a 3 out of 5, but it was, out of the books we've read, it wasn't my favorite so far. But again, it's not because it's a bad book. There's definitely a lot of good there. I'm glad it's something I'm glad I know about. If it ever comes up in conversation, right, I would enjoy talking about it.
Right.
So yeah, I'd say it's a quick read too. It took me forever.
Yeah,
it took me forever to read it, but that's just the way I read things. I have to deal with work and stuff.
I mean, like that's one thing, and a lot of the people who gave it positive reviews I was looking at, they were like, I picked it up and I had it read within a day, like in one sitting or something like that, because
that's pretty.
You get sucked into it and then you can't get out of it.
It also feels like, I don't know if it's because it's coming from a Dutch author, but it also feels like a sort of like a timeless. I mean, I know they try to work some technology in there, but it's almost like a timeless fairy tale type story. You know, like it's.
Oh yeah.
It seems like a story that could fit in a lot of different settings and time periods, because it's almost like a urban legend made novel kind of thing.
Right. And well, you know, kind of speaking of that, if you did say make a series,
oh yeah,
you're not tied to just the time of Catherine and then the time of this. You could go anytime within those 350 years. You could go to like the 1900s, like what was happening during the Civil War, like, or what was happening in the Revolutionary War, or like, you know, West Point, like, you know, when World War II was happening, like different, you know, there's all kinds of how everything developed that you could like expand on. So we should write a treatment and submit it.
Yeah, there you go. Be Lost, but set in the town of Black Spring. Also Black Spring, it's just such a it's a very Twin Peaks-esque.
You know, the whole time when I was today and in other times I've been trying to, like, I kept doing Lost. I keep wanting to call it the Black Rock. I keep wanting to call it town Black Rock.
The Black
Rock. I kept saying the Black Rock Witch, and I was like, it's not Black Rock Witch. What is it? And I had to actually go and look it up. I was like, Black Spring, and I would say Black Spring Witch. I was like, that doesn't sound right. Black Rock Witch sounds better.
Yeah. That's funny. Well, I liked it, and I guess staying tuned for. I think we should do Dune. I'm voting Dune.
All right, we'll do Dune.
I think I'm ready. Because
it's a fast read too. It is.
I hate to give up on The Howling Dark, but I feel like we just read The Empire of Silence. Like it hadn't been that long ago. Let's give it a break and read Dune, and then Song of Susanna.
All right, that'll be our next two.
Dune seems like a chunky book. You're saying it's a pretty quick read, really?
I mean, it to me it was
chunky. I don't have it yet. I need to go buy a copy.
I really want to go buy one of those special covers that they had at Books A Million. Like,
yeah, me too.
Those are really cool.
Yeah, me too. I want to get that, and I'll get. I don't have any Audible credits, but I'll get it on the Kindle.
Right.
No, what I was going to ask you. Well, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week, and peace.
Peace out, everyone. Don't get hexed.
Don't get hexed.